It's on.
It would be awesome if it moved and gets to the point where it's just above our heads.
All right, so we did a video last night. I put it all up just raw. We didn't edit it at all. Put an intro, outro, loaded it up. A bunch of things where we said certain things seem to be missing. We didn't notice it. I started reading the comments, and when we said, well, we shouldn't even say her name.
Why not? Then we'd know for sure.
When I said Hillary Clinton, the video went dead for a couple minutes. And when I said something about troop movement, the video went dead a couple minutes there as well. I don't fucking know.
Hillary Clinton!
Hillary Clinton.
So if it stops right after this, you guys know that there's some sort of virus in the Matrix.
Is this what's the one like where you're sucking a dick and you're moving your leg at
Hillary Clinton.
Fortnite dance? Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton. Troop movement.
What do you want to talk about?
I don't know. What do you want to talk about?
I don't know.
You fired this up.
I don't know. I just thought we'd build a little video and throw it together.
I don't want to talk about old people rule the world, and that's why we're quarantining everybody. And if you look, I'm going to say something that's going to piss people off. There are certain risk factors in life. So, for example, if you're a pilot, there's a certain risk factor to being a pilot. If you're in the military, there's a certain risk factor to being in the military. If you're a nurse or a doctor, there's a risk factor. You chose that profession. If you did not evaluate those risk factors and you end up in a position where you are now in danger, you don't get to whine and bitch about it. You got two choices. You could either not go to work, or you could fucking man up and go execute the job that you selected, versus pretending that somehow I just joined the military for the college fund. No, that's not how it works.
Are you seeing are people bitching?
Oh my God, I had this, and I don't know if it was I don't know if he's a nurse or an EMT, but somebody was going off about, I have to take care of those people, and I'm being exposed to this, and I might. Well, first of all, that's your job. You chose that profession. There is a risk in being in that profession. And guess what? You don't have to go to work. You don't have to go take care of those people. Somebody else will step up, guaranteed. Somebody else will step up and fill the position that you have. But you don't have to go do that. So you don't get to bitch about going there and doing it.
They've mobilized 17,000 National Guard.
Yep.
Do we have 17,000 National Guard?
Oh, we probably have more than that.
Those are mobilized. I heard her say.
When you say that, but when
I
you
don't
say,
know what that means.
What does that mean? Does that mean 17 National Guard guys?
1,000.
Or 17,000 from California?
No, I
or
think it's
New York City?
all everywhere, all in.
Yeah, so that's really when if you take 17,000 guys and you spread them out across the USA, you now see 2 National Guard guys on a corner going.
And they probably don't have bullets.
What are we supposed to do? Hey, you guys go back in your house. It's like I said yesterday's video. National Guard, Reserve, active duty. We do not have enough troops in the United States to lock down the United States. We don't have enough troops.
We don't have to worry because Mexico locked it down.
Yeah, Mexico locked it down.
Mexico and Canada locked it down.
Locked it down.
We're locked down.
Imagine the like. I bet they didn't even think about it. I bet they didn't even be like, hey, what kind of political ramifications are there if we lock down the Canadian border? I bet they didn't even think about it. They're just like, lock it down. And
it's only locked down to motherfuckers walking across.
Yeah, and the other
trucks are still coming.
And the other thing too is even Canada. Mexico might be a different story. Mexico might be a different story because Mexico, they have no problem going to guns. But even Canada, I'll bet if you really wanted to go to Canada right now, you could walk into Canada. That there are no French Canadian soldiers on the border with their M16A4s going, you can't come across.
They have Nerf guns, less lethal.
Yeah, less lethal. So I'll bet you could still get into Canada if you want.
I would not try Jack's Nerf guns either.
I would not try Mexico because Mexico, they don't have.
They'll come over here and shoot some motherfuckers.
Yeah. Mexico does not have a problem with fucking unleashing a fucking Gauss machine gun.
They have
in
grenades
downtown
that
Mexico.
the United States gave them.
Yeah, so I wouldn't try Mexico. They probably. I'll bet all they would have to do is tell the cartel, hey, we really don't want any Americans coming down here. Why don't you close the border for us?
That's that's who fucking
Maybe
runs
like,
Mexico
woo-hoo!
anyways.
Yeah.
That's who runs Mexico. They have more.
Well, I get. You know what? I didn't even think about that until we just started talking about it. But
But the cartels aren't making any money at the
the
borders.
Mexican government probably would have to get permission from the cartel to close the border. Officially to close the border, because the number one thing that they're running now is people.
Yeah, and with all them tunnels and shit.
Yeah, they would have to get
border's not
permission.
closed. When do you think they're going to lock it all down for real? Like they're locking. They're like, please stay in your homes, but people
I
aren't
think-
staying in their homes.
I think what you really need to pay attention, what you guys really need to pay attention to is New York City.
What's going to play out there?
What's going to play out in New York City, because New York City,
They keep prepping us for it's still climbing.
New York City, unfortunately, for people who live in New York City, is a overpopulated, too human dense area, and so it's going to, so it has kind of spread through New York City like wildfire. If the numbers get, I don't know, I mean,
They keep
if
saying
they start getting up in, I bet if they get up past three, I bet if they double the numbers in New York, then they'll be like, hey,
Everywhere's
everybody
locked
else,
down.
you got to fucking lock down.
They keep going. They keep going like New Orleans. The death rate's climbing. Blah blah blah. I don't know why one of them doesn't go because you dumbasses had fucking Mardi Gras. Like why doesn't like why don't they just say it?
Yeah, because the problem is we have been, for the last, I don't know, probably 20 years, maybe even longer than that, we have been, municipalities and governments have been pushing everything up. Instead of taking responsibility for their municipalities and taking responsibility for their states, they've been like, ooh, somebody else has to handle it. It's kind of like Flint, Michigan. Flint, Michigan's water problems are because Flint, Michigan, their governing body. It's because they wasted that tax money on themselves instead of fixing the fucking water. We're always trying to push everything off on the federal government. And the problem is, like I've said before, the federal government is really good if you have an earthquake. So if California has an earthquake, the federal government is really good at mobilizing forces and getting them there and getting stuff there so they can help you with your earthquake. They're really good at floods and tornadoes because those are localized things. So that it's easy to send a bunch of people. But when you're talking about the entire United States, those resources get real thin real quick. So that's the problem. The problem is local municipalities like, i.e. New York City, they tax the people in New York City for New York City government to be prepared for a disaster. They just got finished handling all the lawsuits from 9/11 because they had no respirators for the people working at Ground Zero. You would think that the state would be like, hey man, maybe instead of paying all these lawsuits, we buy some respirators and put them in a fucking garage somewhere so we have them in case we need them. No, they don't. They don't do that.
What about the fucking warehouses they're finding with millions of expired? The expired, because
Yeah.
they have to have a date, so that they have to expire, so we ship them out of the country, so we have to buy more. An expired respirator, an expired piece of cloth. Why didn't somebody think, maybe we should just wear this expired one until we get some non-expired rather than wearing nothing at all?
Well, I would assume that most people in the supply chain would not be aware of where that stuff is.
Who was it? Somebody was fucking.
Oh yeah, of course. The person who's
making
or
money
the
more
company
than the
who's
new
making
ones.
making money, because when you think about it, if you're taking an expired piece of product, right? So the hospital pays whatever. Let's say they pay $10 a fucking respirator. Hospital pays $10 a respirator, and after that, whatever that time
it's
period
like
is,
trash.
it's expired. It's expired.
Yeah.
They're not selling it.
It's garbage.
They're
We're gonna
they're
throw
giving
away,
it to.
but
yeah.
somebody takes it. and
No,
sells
what
it.
they're going to do is they're going to go to a secondhand supplier, somebody like me, and they're going to be like, hey, we have these fucking 30,000 masks that expired last year. What can you do? And I'm going to go.
collecting debt.
I'm going to go, hey, yeah, I'm going to give you
10%.
10% of whatever's off the top. And then the hospital's like, okay, cool. And the reason why that is because of Obamacare. What most people don't know about Obamacare is there was a little sneaky piece of legislation in there. I don't know if it was sneaky or whatever. I don't know the reason for it. But they put in the Obamacare funding that all medical supplies, anything medical related, has to have an expiration date. So your gowns, your
Kleenex.
masks, your fucking pillowcases, everything has an expiration date.
Toilet paper.
So what that means is we are continually buying new medical equipment, and you continually have stuff expiring. Example, I'll give you an example is, we have in Waverly, we have an emergency ambulance contract. So I think there's 4 ambulances there that are on call at all times, because our hospital it's got staff, but it can't really take care of anything that's serious. So you got to be transported to Nashville if you have something serious.
90-minute ride.
Yep, 90-minute ride. So if you have something serious, that company, because everything in the ambulance has an expiration date, every year or so, I don't know what the exact time frame is, they actually take a whole fucking ambulance with all the shit in it, and then they put it in a fucking container, and that ambulance goes overseas somewhere in, I don't know, the fucking Egyptians.
So the
buy it or
ambulance
something.
expires?
Yeah, they sell everything.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I don't know if the ambulance itself expires, but they sell everything. They sell the whole fucking kit caboodle, so they don't have to fucking deal with the shit. So that's kind of your medical situation. It's kind of why everybody's running around going, we don't have enough masks. Well, you don't have enough masks because you are forcing everybody to throw them away every year. The military does the same thing, which is 100% ridiculous. It's the reason why you can see, you see those ads in Facebook where it's like, government liquidation, buy a fucking Humvee and it's got 500 miles on it. It's because every unit gets a certain amount of money every year. You also are allowed to have a certain amount of inventory. So let's say, I'll use helmets as an example. You have 100 helmets, you have 100 Kevlar helmets. In your budget, there is money for new Kevlar helmets every year because things get lost, things get damaged. Well, you are only allowed to have 100 Kevlar helmets. You're only allowed to have 100. You have to spend that money on Kevlar helmets. So if I have enough to buy, I don't know, let's just say 10% more Kevlar helmets, I have to buy every year new Kevlar helmets. All those Kevlar helmets, no matter what condition they're in, the ones that the guys are running around, and they could be brand new, sitting on the shelf in a box, they will take those down to Dermo and they will fucking junk them. But here you go, here's these Kevlar helmets, run them over with a truck or whatever, because that's how the budgets work. So that's the same thing. That's the same thing that's going on with this medical equipment. Because it's expired, the hospital can't hold on to it anymore. They have to replace it with new shit. But if you're only budgeted to have, let's just say, 500 masks. You're only budgeted to have 500 masks at the hospital, and every year they give you money to buy new masks, but your inventory expires. You're only ever going to have 500. You're not going to build up an inventory of thousands of masks. So when some crazy shit like this happens, you're like, oh, guess what? We have a warehouse over here with all this fucking medical equipment that we've been buying for years. No, it's already gone. It's already been trashed. And some of that stuff goes right into the trash. Like even the military, some of that shit goes right into the trash. I spent like 3 days cutting up gas masks with a fucking axe. Boom! Gas masks that came right off the shelf because we got new gas masks. So some of it goes right in the trash. And that's anything, when you think of the government, that's what the government does all the time. Waste, fraud, and abuse.
Why? Because somebody's making money from it.
Yeah, because it's an economical thing. Because people keep making money. So let's go back to those Kevlar helmets.
That's part of your military-industrial complex too.
Let's go back to those Kevlar helmets. Let's say I've got 100 Kevlar helmets, and the year goes by, and we don't go anywhere. We do a little training around here, a little training around here, and those Kevlar helmets are still good to go. And I don't need to buy 10 new Kevlar helmets. Well, what happens to the Kevlar helmet guys that are making the Kevlar helmets?
2 years when we go to war, there's no more.
That company is going to look to go make something else. They're going to look to go make something else instead of making Kevlar helmets for the military. So if you have an ongoing contract that has to be fulfilled every year, then that company will continue to make that product. They'll continue to make that product for you so you always have it. Now, I don't agree with I don't agree with us destroying the product and throwing it away or whatever. Or even, I don't even like the idea of dermo. The units should be able to manage a little bit of extra, but that's why they do it. They do it so that the M1 Abrams tank facility stays an M1 Abrams tank facility and doesn't turn into a fucking Geo Metro facility. That's really why they do it. The Army's actually, I believe for the last 5, you know what? I bet it's even longer. I think it's been the last 10 years have been like, don't build any more tanks. We have too many tanks. We almost have enough tanks to include that are being held in the reserve. About the same amount we had in World War II, and we were building tanks like fucking mad. The M1 Abrams, we got fucking M1 Abrams stacked up in the desert like you wouldn't believe. They got to the point, they were so at the point where they're like, don't build any more tanks. Stop building M1 Abrams tanks. That the United States government said, okay, we still, hey, Egypt, you know what would be cool? Is if we opened a General Dynamics plant in Egypt and started making M1 Abrams tanks in Egypt for you guys. That would be really cool.
How many of those tanks were ever fired at us?
I don't think any of them have been fired at us yet.
How many of our jets have been fired upon us?
Ooh, I don't know. I mean, you could talk about the problem with military technology when you start getting to aircraft, like especially our aircraft or even the M1 Abrams.
We have a kill switch.
It's not a kill switch. It's just they're fucking labor intensive and very expensive to maintain. So
like all those Countachs sitting in the desert.
It's just they're just so after a certain period of time, we don't really worry about them anymore. So like we gave the fucking Iranians like all our Tomcats. We're like F-14 Tomcats out of here, and they went to the Iranians.
Did we fly each one of those there?
Yeah, somebody did. They've got 2, maybe 3 that they can fly. Maybe 3.
Only because those 3 haven't stopped flying yet.
Maybe 2 or 3 that they can fly. So, and who knows what kind of shenanigans the inside of those cockpits look like? Because they're cannibalizing all those other aircraft to keep those 3.
Flame for
they probably got fucking chicken wire in there and all kinds of crazy shit.
Do you think there's any tanks, battle tanks, rolling around on city streets in the United States? Right
No,
now?
there are no. First off,
even with parade tracks.
The M1 Abrams is too heavy. As soon as it turns, so on most of your city streets, anything that's asphalt, as soon as an M1 Abrams turns, it will lift and separate that asphalt from the road. So as soon as it turns, it just totally destroyed that road. I think when people, the problem is when people say tanks, they're not distinguishing the fact of a tank versus an armored personnel carrier.
MRAP.
Almost all police departments in any major city have fucking MRAPs. And
they give them to them.
Yeah, even Waverly. Little Waverly Sheriff's Department, we've got a fucking MRAP.
I think we got one in Canada.
I keep trying to get them and let me drive it, but there's something wrong with the air brakes. So if you know anything about MRAP air brakes, give me a tutorial so I can go down there and fix it, and then I guarantee you I could use it as a daily driver. But yeah, so that's the thing, is disseminating whether you're talking about an actual tank, because right now there's absolutely no reason why you would see an M1 Abrams, or even maybe an LAV, or even a fucking, any of the heavy stuff anywhere in the United States on a public road.
What do you think?
It just doesn't make any sense.
Road right now?
It would be
Up-armored Humvee.
Yeah, some sort of up-armor Humvee or an MRAP or something like that.
Think they got guns in the twigs?
No.
So there's a bunch of photos. There's some photos being posted around of dudes with machine guns and shit in these Humvees. They're all getting busted out. That the photos that and it's news. It's media that's posting these photos, and it's getting busted out that these photos are 6 years old, or they're 4 years ago, or was it Jade Helms, or whatever.
That's the common problem is we're so information heavy that if I can almost post a picture of, like, for example, Trump did the parade and they had an M1 Abrams and a Bradley fighting vehicle, I think, at the parade. I'll bet there's somebody that has a picture of that was taken at the right angle, so it looks like there's an M1 Abrams sitting on the mall, and I could post that and go, hey, guess what? they brought tanks to Washington, and everybody would be like, "Woo, Washington tanks!"
Keep in mind, like I keep seeing these things about how they're striking at Amazon and they're shutting Amazon down. They're doing all these things, right? There's a really good video on YouTube. It's about 90 minutes long, and it talks about how on a Black Friday, Amazon had all these workers strike. Those workers, there was only, out of the 100 or so people that were outside picketing, only 20 of them were employed by Amazon, and they were flown in from another state. They didn't actually work at that facility. The facility where this happened, nobody struck, nobody was picketing. The media is going to spin that. Just like the McDonald's workers, we want $18 an hour, and they show how there's this big, huge fucking crowd of all these people in these orange vests and shit. It looked impressive when you saw it. You're like, oh, McDonald's might have to hire $18 an hour employees. When you saw the other photo from the other angle that the other people took, it was only 20 people there. It wasn't.
And I guarantee you, all those people were bought and paid for.
Every one of them. Every one of them. So if you have some information or some photos, if you have something that you want to post and share with us, post it. We'd love to hear it. Don't tell us something you think you saw or some shit you read. Post stuff that you actually saw yourself. If we all did that, things around the world would change hugely.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the reality is, I think New Jersey, and so there's some municipalities in New York City that actually do have National Guard troops on the ground, and they are driving around telling everybody to stay in the house. That's a lot different than when people are screaming about martial law. A Humvee driving down the street telling people to stay in their house. It's not really martial law. They're technically asking you. When you see them out in the street with fucking M16s that actually have ammunition, and they're actually forcing people to go back in their house, that's a different story. Then we're really talking about martial law. Right now, everybody, so including the president, is kind of like, pretty please,
Before we make you?
pretty please do it. So I don't, you know, when I hear any of this stuff about fucking tanks and troops on the street, I'm not worried about it, because we have, I don't know who it is, but our National Guard, we have a tank. Camden has a tank unit. They have an engineer unit. We have an MP unit. So we have a military police unit here
That's what we'd be doing.
with armored vehicles, and those guys aren't even coming to work. So that's who would be doing it. Like if Nashville said, hey, we're declaring martial law, those guys would all truck up and they would be going there. Waverly, there's not going to be any National Guard troops in Waverly. Not a single National Guard. We won't see a single. The only National Guard troops we will see is the ones driving out of town. So I am not too worried about it. The thing that like I told John, is, you know, if let's say everything went, let's just say things go toes up and fucking California starts burning the ground and New York City starts eating people, and all military forces get called up to go fucking quell all this bullshit. The only thing I would worry about here in this area is the power vacuum, right? As soon as all those assets, because, you know, we do have a lot of, what do they call it, fucking task force. We got a lot of task force around here. A lot of cops in vests with armored personnel carriers and AR-15s that are task forcing around. Those guys are going to get called out. They are going to be asked to go to bigger cities. And that will create a power vacuum here, where it will not be hard for somebody to be like, hey, guess what? I am now the mayor of Camden, and I'm going to get my 10% tax from everybody. Whether that's, you know, everybody's got to bring me 4 rolls of toilet paper or whatever the fuck it is. That's the only thing I think that we have to worry about here in a small town. Is just the power vacuum that could technically happen if shit goes fucking toes up everywhere else. Which, once again, I'm not too concerned about that, because there's a lot of rebels here.
When those guys start getting shot, that kind of fucking takes the wind out of the sails.
It does take the wind out of the sails.
You can bang on Granny's door and demand some fucking money, but when you bang on the other door, and bullets come through it, that kind of ends that.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. It's interesting.
All right, we'll keep this one short. Maybe
Short.
it'll load up.
Hillary Clinton. Maybe it won't.
We have
You did say her name a bunch of times.
We have, are these respirators? These are not respirators. They're masks.
Masks.
We're making masks. They have a pocket, so you can put some kind of filter that you already have in there. We're making a mask that will go over an N95 mask, so with the thoughts that you can bake it in the evening, sterilize it. We just heard anything you can put in a 2% bleach solution will also kill the virus. So they're taking, I guess they're able to put in 95 masks in a 2% bleach solution in the evening, and then the next day they're ready to use. This is basically a mask for your mask is what we're building. It's better than nothing if you don't have anything, but the idea is that you will put some kind of filtration in it, whatever you can get locally. We have a couple of designs we're working on. We hope to have those out in the next day or so for sale. That's it. Just watch the live feed. If you're watching this now, I know we didn't show you anything in the video to look at mask-wise. My live feed on Facebook last night shows them very well, talks about the detailed changes. They're in there right now. It's after 5 o'clock. The employees have left. They're in there working on designs right now, a couple people. I'm going to work on some more tonight. Hopefully we'll have a final product and something on the website tomorrow. I will put this video up tonight. I have to do something else now. Put out.
Put out.
Put out.